Number one, acknowledging it, just owning it, because for a long time I hid from it, and anything you don't want to look at, it's going to fester and cause you more problems, right? So stepping into it saying, wow, sometimes I really struggle with feeling like a fraud. One of the things I've learned is once you name something, you take power over it. That's just a psychological fact. So you could name it, and I'll make up a name. My son used this for a fear he had, Euler. It's a made up name, but you could call that Euler. And you know what, Euler? I'm taking charge of you. The more that you own that and claim that and speak to that entity, the imposter syndrome, you're owning it and you're making it go away. You're shrinking it. You're taking the power away from it. So that's like a great way to really take charge of something. Any fear that you have in your life, the more that you step into it, acknowledge it, it's going to make it smaller. And then sharing it with someone. Because I remember the first time I shared that feeling with a friend of mine, very successful attorney. She's a partner in a major firm in Miami. And she started laughing. She said, I can't believe you're telling me this. I said, why? She said, I feel the same way, but I never told anyone. And so when we had that conversation, we both made one another feel better, because not only did we understand it and support one another, but we're not alone. And when we had that realization, we realized there's so many women with this problem, and not just women, there's so many people with this problem. So what I've learned time and time again is stepping into that fear, claiming it, sharing it with the world really allows that shame and fear to subside, and it kind of starts going away.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone, very special guest today, I guess a budding superstar, in my opinion. Let me tell you about her a little bit. Her name is Heather Monahan. She is a best-selling author, keynote speaker with the Harry Walker Agency. That's big time if you didn't know. Entrepreneur and the founder of Boss in Heels. Now, having successfully climbed the corporate ladder for nearly 20 years, Heather is one of the few women to actually break through the glass ceiling and claim her spot in the C-suite. Now, as the chief revenue officer for a major media company, Heather Monahan is actually a recipient of the Glass Ceiling Award winner, named one of the most influential women in radio in 2017. And Thrive Global named her a limit-breaking female founder in 2018. Heather's new book, Confidence Creator, shot to numero uno, that's right, number one on Amazon's business biographies and business motivation lists. In the very first week it debuted on Amazon, Heather is a confidence expert, and she is currently working with Fortune 500 companies and professional sports teams to develop confidence in the workplace and on the court. She is also a member of Florida International University's Advisory Council, where she further serves as a mentor and leader in the South Florida community. Heather and her preteen, threatening to be an adult son, Dylan, reside in beautiful Miami, Florida. Welcome to the show, Heather. Thanks for coming on. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Glad to see you there, and looking forward to digging into your book and into your baggage, your history a little bit. You've got quite a colorful story. I think that our audience is going to be entertained as well as inspired by it. But before we get too far into it, being that you are actually a trained stand-up comedian, Heather, please take the next 5 minutes and tell us your best joke.
That's interesting. No one's ever asked me that. So you're referencing a chapter from my book. And when I was going through a time in my life a few years ago where I was feeling like I wasn't living to my potential. I was feeling stuck, but I didn't have the answer or the solution. How do I get unstuck? What am I missing? I was a little lost. Now that sounds interesting because at the time I was making a ton of money. I had a huge job. I was a mother. I had a lot of great things going for me. I was sitting on the board of a major charity. I was an executive vice president of a company. But no matter what it looks like on the outside, someone can appear so wonderful and it looks like they have it all together. That's usually not the case. It certainly wasn't with me. Inside, I was feeling really empty. And I had been seeing a hypnotist ever since I got divorced. I was turned on to a hypnotist to really help. When you're in a funk or in a negative situation, a hypnotist is an amazing, if you know a good hypnotist, I happen to. I went to this gentleman and he helped me when I got divorced really kind of speed through some of the breakthroughs I needed to have happen to get out of that funk. When you get divorced, you get really low. And he was a catalyst to help me bounce back quickly. Well, he became somewhat of an advisor to me over the last decade. And I went to see him one day to tell him, listen, his name's Todd. I said, Todd, I'm struggling. I just feel stuck and I don't know what I'm missing, but I'm not connecting all the dots. Yes, I'm doing well. Yes, I'm making a lot of money, but something's missing from my life. And he said, you know what? When you're in a situation like this, you need to really go out of your comfort zone. And everyone always says that. I hear it every day at my workout. I hear it everywhere. But what I didn't know what that meant. Yes, going out of my comfort zone back then, I was, always striving for bigger goals at work, or, I was raising a son on my own and that was out of my comfort zone. But really going out of your comfort zone is what he had me do. He said, why don't you take a stand-up comedy class? And I said, no, absolutely not. And he said, why not? I said, it sounds terrible. And he said, that means it's out of your comfort zone. Do you get it? And so in that moment, I said, oh my gosh, he's right. If I have this visceral reaction that I really don't want to do something, why is that? So it felt so foreign to me that I agreed. I said, okay, I'll do it. And let me tell you, it was so weird. And literally, they make you crawl around on the ground. And the people in the class were not the kind of people I was used to being around. They were, a variety of people who struggled with confidence, people who struggled with owning their voice, people who struggled with interacting with others. And so there was it was a very diverse group, not my kind of people, not the people I was used to being around. I did not like going, so I was out of my comfort zone, but I kept going back week after week to kind of see, what am I going to learn from this experience other than I don't like it? And what I ended up learning is, no, I'm not a stand-up comic. I'm pretty clear on that one. However, I do love stand-up comedy because now I have a whole other appreciation for what these guys go through, guys and ladies go through. So what I learned was, one day, one of our tasks was each person had to take the stage alone and everybody else would sit and be a mock audience, and you had to speak for 5 minutes. And it could be about anything. You could tell jokes, you could tell a story, you could read a poem. It could be whatever you want to do. And people really flipped out. They were so nervous and taken aback and confused and didn't know what to say and sweating. And it was really not a great scene. However, for me, it was really easy. It just came natural. I stood up and I just told this story. I remember the story. I told a story of when I was giving a speech in Texas to 3,000 people, and I ended up getting harassed that night, and a friend of mine really rescued me and helped me out. Anyways, I told that story. It's a really interesting personal story, something that happened to me. And they had to tell me, all right, Heather, cut, enough. You've been up there 8 minutes. It was supposed to be 5, but I completely lost track of time. And that experience taught me this. Yes, Todd was right. When you really move into something you're uncomfortable with, and that does not mean hitting a certain speed level on a bike, because people will say that, get uncomfortable in your workout. You're pushing yourself, but that's not really getting uncomfortable. Getting uncomfortable is when someone says, you should go try this, and you say, no way, I'm not doing it. It sounds horrible. I don't want to do it. When you really feel that resistance, that's getting uncomfortable. When you say, okay, I'm dreading this, but I'm going to go do it. And I'm dreading it because it's so foreign to me. So I did it, and I learned, for me, taking a stage and speaking is very natural. And that is a superpower, because I didn't know that prior to that moment, but I was standing in a room of, 50 people, and no one else felt comfortable doing that. And to me, it just came natural. And that really opened my eyes to something I talk about in my book, which is, how do you identify your superpower? And once you find it, how can you find ways to spend time in it? Because once you do that, number one, identify it. And then number two, start spending time in it. You really start to step into confidence in a different way, a really organic, authentic way that is not forced. It really just happens naturally, and it's very powerful.
Holy cow, that was awesome. And no jokes though, that was pretty serious stuff. So I'm a little bit disappointed. I just thought you were going to tell a knock knock joke or something. You are much deeper than you let on to be, young lady, and appreciate that. Comfort zone is something that there is death in the comfort zone, if you would. By the way, I don't see a therapist, but I do carry my own crystal ball with me. So, so I'm that's all I wanted. It was a little light humor to it. Yeah, appreciate that. But being a comedian and all that is very important stuff, and appreciate you kind of sharing that success that you made out of that and stepping out of your comfort zone. We'll talk about what's next for your comfort zone a little bit later in the show, as well as your superpowers. But let's dig into how you became Heather Monahan. Let's talk about your story. You mentioned in the book and on several videos that I've watched of you about your meager upbringings. Can you just tell us about that? And what I'm really looking for the audience to understand is that you had struggles early on in life, and it kind of set your foundation in a few different ways. But I want you to say it in your own words. How was it growing up?
So I did not have an idyllic childhood, to say the least. I grew up poor. My mother was a single mom with 4 kids, and she worked 3 jobs. We moved into a trailer behind my grandparents' home when my mother initially left my biological father. And those times were tough. We were on food stamps, and I felt really ashamed of who I was, where I came from. And I just felt like I lived in this dark lane, just this really dark space. And I would see other people flourishing in life and, on TV or whatever, and thought they had this great life. But I thought certain people were just born this way, how I was born, and then other people were born this other really fabulous way. And what I didn't realize back then is you can chart whatever course you want, regardless of where you come from, whatever your background is, no matter how you feel. And it took me, 2, 3 decades to really figure that out. But one thing that happened as a result of that is I swore to myself at a very young age, I will not struggle for money in my life. I hated that we struggled for money, and it was a bad feeling. So when I was very young, I started with the paper route. Then I started bussing tables at a diner. Then I started waitressing. Then I started fast food restaurants. Then I started bartending. I was always working, and leaning in to be a hard worker became a foundation of who I was and what that key to success was for me. It sounds very simplistic. However, it's extremely overlooked in business that if you're willing to put the hard work in, hard work outshines talent all day long. So I figured out I didn't have to be the most talented person in the room. I just had to be willing to put in the time, put in the effort and work. And I'll tell you, that paid off my whole career. And not only as a young person, but I'm 44 now, and in my late 30s, early 40s, I was still in corporate America. Innovation, as we all know, has been wildfire the past decade. And no one in the organization that I was leading at the time was really stepping into how do we innovate. And I used to go home at night very late when I would get out of work, and I would read every night. I would read different trades. I would read technology magazines. I wanted to find a way to innovate the company that I was leading because nobody else was bringing a profitable solution to the table. So
Where do you, Heather?
I
Where do
took
you
that
think
on.
that? Sorry to interrupt you. Where do you think that came from? Like you mentioned in your talks that you really didn't have any guidance as a youngster there, but your positivity got you through those hard times. Kind of built your foundation of innovation and of consistent improvement and hustle. Where did that come from? Where'd your positivity come from? Was it from your mom? Was it from your grandparents? Was it from your stepdad?
Probably from, yeah, my stepfather. I ended up getting adopted when I was 10 or 11. My mom got remarried, so now he is my father. And yeah, probably from my dad because he was a really supportive force that came into my life still at a young age, and he became, he and I both love sports. He was in sales. He really brought a lot specifically to me. He became my coach, my softball coach, and really was very supportive of me at a younger age, and stayed that way, throughout my entire career. And there's a lot of similarities with him and I, uh, you know, in that we both really leaned into sales, and found success in sales. So yeah, I guess it would probably, if I had to point to someone, it would be from him.
Yeah, they say that most males can become fathers, but it takes a special one to be a dad. And for you to introduce him as your dad was the biggest compliment that you could have ever given to him. I will tell you that much, being a father myself. You did say a comment though that sometimes having positivity is viewed as like AKA delusional. Can you expound on that a little bit? Because a lot of our listeners are in the professional sales industry, and they are positivity, but that delusional concept or comment you made is kind of interesting. Can you expound on that?
Sure. You're talking about a speech that I gave a few years ago at a charity event. And I was talking about kids that grow up in a really dark space like I had, and much worse, actually. Most of these kids, their parents are in jail, and, they're just out on their own. So their life is really dark. And I was talking about not everyone is born with this innate ability to see the positive upside in things. And it's really critical, specifically in sales, but ultimately in life, to practice that and develop that muscle if you're not born with it. I don't know that I necessarily was born with it. However, I've refined it, and I step into it every day. I practice it with my son. Each day when we drive to school, we say, what are you looking forward to right now? We all have that same opportunity to look at what's so negative in our life, or to look at what is potentially coming that's going to be great, or what we're grateful for. And there is an inability to be in a place of gratitude and feel stressed out, angry, or negative. It's not physically possible. So I've really developed over my life this ability to step into gratitude, step into positivity, and focus on the things I'm looking forward to, instead of being taken down by the negative occurrences that happen to all of us. And some people may see that as, oh, she's nuts. She's sitting here in this awful situation, like I was at work in corporate America, 2 years ago, where I had a woman who hated me and
We're not going
backstabbed
there
me.
yet. We're still stuck in Michigan. We're
but
gonna
uh,
go
but
to
I'm
Michigan
giving
next.
I'm giving you a real life example, and
Yep.
people would see me
Yep.
and say, "How do you put up with this?" And I would say, "You know what? Because I'm behind the scenes and I'm working on this innovation plan for the company."
Ah,
And I would step right into my positivity. I wouldn't go down that rabbit hole
I
with
see.
people. And sometimes people would say to me, "You're nuts. You're
That's
not
right.
seeing what's really happening here, Heather." And they thought I was somewhat delusional. And it's interesting because there is something to be said for their perspective, because they were right. I was ignoring
Yeah.
a really negative situation. So that wasn't necessarily, it's not always the right answer. However, it's been what has helped me survive really negative situations throughout my life. And as I become older and more aware of my own shortcomings, my own strengths, I can kind of see both sides of it now and appreciate both. I'm grateful I was never this person that went down the negative rabbit hole. However, now, today I'm able to view both sides of it, appreciate both sides, and make better decisions moving forward as a result.
That's awesome, and thank you for sharing that. I was reminded earlier today, and it's interesting. There was a very wise statement that you just said there. That you're now able to look at both sides and appreciate it more. Unfortunately, they say wisdom is wasted on the old. Now you're not old yet, but you kind of get where I'm going. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to do that back in the your 20s, to have that kind of wisdom? One of the, call it, pearls of wisdom that you give to us as your audience is to surround yourself with positive people to build yourself up. That gives you confidence that's there. You talk about a time where you ended up in Saginaw, Michigan. Now, do you know I'm in Michigan? Like, I'm in Metro Detroit, Michigan. So when I read that, I kind of got taken aback a little bit. And then I said, well, she's actually right. So truth hurts sometimes. But tell us about that. You were dropped off in Saginaw, Michigan. You worked in media, but your big claim to fame, as I read into it, was the sale of this property that was developed, this real estate. Can you kind of tell us about your experience in Michigan and what you learned from it and about that property?
Sure. So in my early 20s, I was given the opportunity to be an equity partner for a radio company. The hitch was I had to be willing to move and leave everything I'd known in Massachusetts my whole life and go alone to be dropped off in the middle of Michigan, in the middle of nowhere, not in Detroit. I wish I like a city, but no, this is a very rural area. And, it was not an attractive opportunity. What I did was under 3 years, I took a $27 million property and turned it into a $55 million property through accelerating revenues, decreasing expenses, and really changing the culture of the existing organization through my leadership and through, really we completely revamped the sales department, and that was the biggest change that I brought to that team.
Gotcha.
So during that time, it was definitely lonely. I worked all the time. I never went on one vacation because I was so clear and honed in on I needed to make this a success, and I wanted to do it in a really short window of time. So in turn, that really paid major dividends. It brought me a lot of cash flow as an individual and a young individual, and that was a goal of mine, was to have a lot of money in the bank so I never had to worry. And the other thing it did for me was it really built a name for me in business, and I'm grateful for that time. However, I have zero desire to go back and do something like that again. Oh my gosh, that was
Come back and visit. Come back and visit. We'd love to have you. That was with Jeff, right? You worked with Jeff in the Wilkes Group.
yes.
Great guy. What did you learn from working with Jeff?
He's the consummate salesperson. So, up until then, really only my father had been a mentor in regards to sales. And Jeff is on 24/7. He is the toughest boss I've ever worked for in my career. And he's really in your face, very aggressive. So he taught me that he's like a Grant Cardone type sales technique, that really aggressive approach, which, hey, there's a lot of different approaches. It works for some, doesn't for other. I had never developed that approach. He really helped me step into that. So am I that way any longer? No. However, there are certain components of my sales approach that are very much still fundamentally based in what he taught me. And, as women specifically, and, certain men, they may feel uncomfortable aggressively asking for the close. They might feel uncomfortable asking for the order. They may feel uncomfortable dropping a pen. When you work for someone like Jeff, as I did for years, that is not an option. So you are moving through that fear, you are busting through it, or you're leaving a team. And it was that, when you do anything repetitively, frequency sells. So anytime you do something with repetition for a while, it's not a big deal anymore. It becomes part of what you do. So every day, multiple times a day, I was dropping a pen in front of someone, asking them to sign a contract. And he used to have this direction for me: never leave a meeting without dropping a pen and asking for a signature. I was 24. So I said, okay, this is the guy that's paying me. Everywhere I go, I ask for a signature. And he would say, it doesn't matter if you're in a bar room, pull out a napkin, get a cocktail napkin. And there was plenty of deals that I did in restaurants on cocktail napkin. It didn't matter. But then when my people would struggle and say, well, you can do it, I can't do it, which is complete BS, I would say, okay, then let's do this. We're going to have a contest this month because I'm sick of hearing how no one can drop a pen. And the contest is this: you either come back with a signed contract or you come back with them signing, I say no to this deal. And so it forced them. You can't go on the call if you don't get a signature. You have them sign, I don't want to buy this. Or they sign, here's my name and I'm buying it. So I really flipped the script on them, and I created a system so that they became comfortable dropping the pen and asking for the order. And that worked really well.
That's awesome. You sound like Alec Baldwin's character in Glengarry Glen Ross. Any chance you know what I'm talking about there?
I do. Coffees for closers, baby.
Coffee for closers. That's awesome. Thank you for that. So let me ask you this, and I'm trying. No, don't want to go down that street just yet. But who, Heather, do you have surrounding you today?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So this is kind of deep, but stepping into my passion and really doing purpose-driven work now, which is so entirely different than anything I've ever done in my career. The past year and a half, I've been an entrepreneur. I work for myself. I wrote my first book. I'm writing my second book. I started my online courses. I started my speaking business. So I'm doing there's a lot of tentacles to what I do. However, since I've stepped into this, amazing people have begun to show up. And I truly believe there's a few different reasons why that's the case, because this never happened for me back in corporate America, by the way. So, because people will say that's just you. No, it's not. This is moving into what you're supposed to be doing. When you move into that space to where your heart is really drawing you, to where you're supposed to live and breathe every day and you're passionate about it and excited, amazing things just start happening and the universe rises up to support you. So, interestingly enough, it's a long story to get you to who my newest mentor is. And this is very interesting. I was in Vegas for a speaking engagement with the WNBA this summer, and there had been a guy that reached out to me on social saying, "Hey, I think you should get with my video platform. You have great content. We could monetize it for you. This can be a revenue stream." I didn't know anything about online teaching. I knew it was $1 billion business, but I didn't know the ins and outs, right? So I was not looking at that business. So I thought, okay, I can learn something new. I'm going to go meet with the guy. He's in Vegas. I'm in Vegas. So I met with his company, Lightspeed VT, and it was $25,000 to create the production with them. However, they would monetize it for you. But that chunk of money to me, it was too much investment. I couldn't make at that point. So I said, guys, I can't make the investment. I like you maybe in the future, but I'm moving on. I move on. And over the next few months, I just created it on the cheap. My content, I filmed it in my house. I didn't go to some big production studio and pay 25 grand. I did it with friends, and content is content. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, if you have the most beautiful production or not. My content's great. And it's what I've learned over the past 44 years that I could teach people at my kitchen table or on, at the White House. It doesn't matter. So I created the content. I put it on a different platform because I was able to do it much easier and make it work. So when it was live, I thought, well, I should go to my expert friend and see what he thinks. So I reached out to my friend Tony in Vegas and I said, I know I'm not with you. However, I created a product and I'd like you to lay eyes on it and just give me your 2 cents. I want to know if I'm going in a good direction or not, if you can. He said, of course I will. It cost me nothing. I'll look at it this weekend. He called me right back and said, your content is amazing. I can't believe you did this on your own. I'd love to represent you. I said, what does that mean? He said, Heather, I work with State Farm. I work with all these massive companies all around the country. Wow. I have hundreds of thousands of people that buy online teaching. Would you like me to sell your course to them? You do the math, right? At $299 a course, hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's millions of dollars. So here I was, this entrepreneur struggling to figure out a way to sell my product by going back to someone who showed up in my life, asking for their help, which is a key element in building confidence and succeeding in business. I was able to have him champion what I was doing. Now, fast forward a couple of weeks, he's out pitching my new content to all his hundreds of thousands of contacts. He calls me from a meeting. He said, Heather, I'm in a meeting with Jerry Acuff. He's one of the top 10 salespeople in the United States. He's won countless awards. He leads pharma, as the #1 sales trainer, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, Jerry, great to meet you. I'm just blindsided by this call. How can I, help you guys out? And Jerry said, actually, Heather, I'm 70 years old and I was here to help you out. And I said, well, what does that look like? And he said, and he starts telling me about his business. He's light years ahead of where I am. His business makes millions and millions of dollars a year, has for the past 20 years. He's an entrepreneur, extremely successful. He's got all of the pharmaceutical contacts. He's taking all the big stages and he's the expert in sales. And he said, but what I like about you is you're female, #1. #2, you have a different background than I do. You're from media. You've written a book. He's saying like all the things that are a little bit different or unique about me. And he said, you're really stepping into confidence. I'd like to put the confidence element into my programs. Maybe you and I could partner together. which
Nice.
again, I just start seeing dollar signs. I was so excited because here's yet again another organic way to create more revenue and have experts leading you so you're learning as well as you're making money. So Jerry and I end up breaking off and having separate calls. And it was so funny. 2 days ago, he called me one night. I was putting my son in the shower and he said, I need to speak to you right now. I've been reading your book and I feel like your recipe isn't clear enough. I want you to formulate a stronger, more black and white recipe that you can hand to people. We can monetize that at a higher level if you can really simplify. And I thought that was great advice. And, anytime I always take notes, no matter whoever I'm talking to. And I was taking notes crazy speaking to him. And at the end of the call, he said this to me. He said, did you ever see The Lion King? I said, yes. He said, Heather, you are not living up to the potential that is within you. And I'm not going to let you deny the world from your gifts. I am going to help lead and mentor you. So my newest mentor is Jerry. He's amazing. And the fact that he believes so much in me and wants me to grow beyond what I didn't even know these things were possible that these guys are doing. They're teaching me an entirely new business and they're light years ahead of me. So they're allowing me to basically ride their coattails to learn at such a more rapid rate. And that's why it's critical to find, yes, I had mentors in my old business, but you know what? I became an expert in that business after 20 years. So there wasn't much those guys could teach me anymore. And now here I am in this new business. And now I have new mentors that are stretching me beyond anything I ever knew was even possible. So it's been a great ride, but yeah, my mentors have helped me immensely and my new ones, fantastic.
I have to tell you, you sound moderately excited and enthusiastic about that.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Way to go, Jerry. Keep up the good work. But it wasn't an easy path. You were in this great role. You were kind of maxed out. You were in the C-suite, getting it done for this media company, very, very prominent family-owned media firm that was out there. And you started, from what I could gather, you started developing your own personal brand. And right now, Boss and Heels is kind of your brand, along with the book and a couple of other things you're doing. But Boss and Heels is kind of what I think that a lot of people know of you as, or your platform that's there. But can you talk to, like, what happened? Like, you had a great gig, you were going along. Why develop a personal brand? And do you feel now, looking back, that you might have actually self-sabotaged your corporate career, like unconsciously, so that you could actually become who you are today?
That's interesting. So as I was saying a few years ago, remember we were talking about Todd earlier, I was kind of in this space where I was making a lot of money, but I would come home at night and I was not fulfilled. It was very obvious. I'd complain about my work trips. I wasn't learning anything. I've learned more in the last year and a half than I did in the last 10 years when I was working at that company. That's really sad. So if you are anyone who's listening right now, if you're somewhere and you're not learning, get out, because I wasted a lot of time. I could have, gosh, I can't even imagine what I could be doing right now if I had been doing this for 10 years. So, getting here, the biggest catalyst back in corporate America to create change for me was having the courage to launch a personal brand. I did that because, number one, I was in media and I was sitting in front of large clients every day, advising them to elevate their brands. I was advising them to be their authentic selves. I was advising them to tell me their organic, real stories so that I could help them create campaigns to draw people towards them. And I would hear myself giving this advice every day. And I started thinking, how am I as a leader sitting here? This is ridiculous. So I thought I need to start taking my own advice. And P.S., my advice is so spot on. It's so good. So I thought, why wouldn't I take that advice? As there doesn't need to be any media companies anymore. Any brand is their own media company. So essentially, I was advising my clients on how they could become their own media companies. And in one of those meetings, I had that epiphany moment and I left there and I went to dinner that weekend with a good friend of mine who's a CMO. And we had our boys are the same age. We were at dinner and I said, her name's Candy. I said, Candy, I have an idea. I want to launch my own personal brand and really tell the story of how I came from nothing, how I fell in so many holes and ditches along the way, but how I dug my way out and how I made it here and how anyone else can too. This is a story that needs to be told for those people that were like me, that didn't have that insight. It's not fair that just wealthy people that are born to successful people get this info and insight. That's wrong. And I was really committed to getting my voice and my story out there so other people could leapfrog these other, these other people. So anyways, we created a plan, and with her help, she's brilliant, phenomenal CMO. She really stepped in, never charged me a dime, was just a great friend. We started whiteboarding. Okay, what does this brand look like? Number one, what are the brand pillars? What does Heather Monahan stand for? So authenticity, transparency, confidence, empowerment. So we started just, writing it same way I would with any type of brand I was working with. We really started building this plan, and from a very real place. And at night and on the weekends, we'd sit at my kitchen table and what is the image of this person? Well, you know what? I had been told my whole career, wear a pantsuit, have your hair pulled back in a bun, dress like this. And that's not me. And the more I started stepping into the real me, the stronger, more powerful, and better I got. So I said, you know what? I wanted to be boss in heels. I want to rock my Jimmy Choos. I want to wear my skirts and let people know this is how I dress. This is who I am. And I'm not embarrassed about it. And if you have purple hair and that's your thing, rock it with pride and confidence. Or if you're a man and you're very feminine, rock that. But don't let the world tell you how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to sound, how you're supposed to dress. Because I did sign up for that program for a very long time. Yes, it gave me a great paycheck. Well, I earned a great paycheck because I did a great job. But you know what? I got to a point, I was sick of playing someone that I'm not. And when I started showing up as me, I became the most powerful version of myself that there was. And that really was the cornerstone of the brand. I launched the brand, and immediately the CFO at my company called me and said, take it down. No, this is confusing, and people don't feel good about what you're doing. And I said, I've spoken to attorneys. I will put disclaimers on that it has nothing to do with work. I will hire a team to manage it so that you see it's not taking away from work. I will copy you back on the receipts. I mean, I was so transparent with them, and I gave them every reason not to fire me. However, in the end, essentially, me shining my light really caused an uncomfortable situation for them that they did not like. They liked it when I dimmed my light and played it small, but when I really stepped into my power, it made them very uncomfortable, and I ultimately was fired.
You started from the bottom, and then you outgrew that cloak. I appreciate the story, and it actually hits home with me and a lot of our audience members as well. So thank you for sharing that. There's a lot in your book. There's a lot of things that if we had 3 hours to go through, we would definitely dig in. But I want to kind of promote the book a little bit. It's terrific. You guys can see that I dove in and just loved the book. Just so much content and value that's there. Can't wait to get 2.0, by the way. So kudos on that endeavor and effort, Heather. Looking forward to that. So, but let me ask you a couple questions. You mentioned in here that comparison is the thief of all joy. Can you tell us about that a bit?
It's so funny because I was just thinking I'm finishing my second book right now, and I have a very different perspective today on comparison, and I want to share it with you. So when I wrote that book, like anything, people evolve, right? And you learn different things along the way. When I wrote that book, I was truly learning how to create my confidence from a very real, sustainable place. And that was a real growth moment for me. And so when I was younger, I would compare myself to more beautiful people, skinnier people, wealthier people, smarter people, better degrees than me, whatever it was. And I would feel badly about it. Now, what I share in my first book is that, if you're following someone on social media and you feel that way, that you're jealous of them, you feel less than, unfollow that person. You don't need your energy going to them. You don't need to, be focusing on them. You need to be focusing on you and the vision of you. Right. Stay in your lane. And where are you going forward from here? I train myself, instead of taking a spin class and saying, oh my gosh, the spin instructor's body is amazing. I say, oh my gosh, I gave birth to a child and I am doing amazing. So looking at what's great and special about you instead of focusing on what someone has. So that's kind of what that first book is about. However, today, once you're able to create confidence and learn that you can do it and rebuild it again, because there's highs and lows and things will happen and you'll have to rebuild it. I've learned today that comparison can kind of be a place of potential growth. And let me tell you what I mean by that. We were talking about Elena Cardone earlier, you and I, who's an amazing woman that I love. She's extremely successful, and financially, she's ahead of where I am right now. I met with her a month or two ago, and after leaving her, we were talking about speaking engagements and whatnot. I came home, and she and I have spoken at many similar events and, definitely are on the same level as far as professional speakers. I came home and I Googled her because I like to look at what someone else is doing so I can learn. Someone's ahead of me, I want to learn from them. And man or woman, it doesn't matter. I can always pick up a tip. So I want to improve my website, and I was looking at her website and I saw she's charging $50,000 a speech. Now, the old me would have said, I'm so jealous, why can't I make that much money? What I've learned is when you come from a place of confidence, which is where I'm coming from today, and I wasn't, a year and a half ago, I'm able to look at that and say, wow, I'm charging 10 grand, yet she and I speak on the same stages. I'm undervaluing myself. I have more opportunity here and I'm short selling myself. Hang on. I've got more potential than I realized. Thank you, Elena, for showing me that. And so that's really how I've turned that comparison. Now I put comparison to work for me, where before I used it against me.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I was confused. I watched a video of your presentation to where you said, forget the lanes, blow the lanes, go where you want to go. You're not confined to a lane. The only person that put you in that lane is you.
Right.
So you can get yourself out of that. So thanks for the clarification. And I appreciate you passing that little test there. Great job. You're authentic and your stuff is legit. Speaking of being legit, though, let's talk about this thing that you call a fraud mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different concepts in here, but let's go to the book on this one, and I'm just gonna read in here a little bit here. All right, you say here that essentially your secret is out. Like a woman especially doesn't have to see those same challenges, and I'll go to the book. Women don't always see those same challenges as a natural progression. Instead, they feel afraid of being found out. They're afraid, found out that they're not perfect, found out that they have commitments at home to their families, found out that they simply don't have all the answers. Meanwhile, I meet with men on my team who can't wait to share with me how they love to leave work early to go coach their kids' teams. Some go so far as to say that their coaching duties actually benefit the company because of their leadership qualities are refined in the field and applied in the workplace. Believe it or not, though, nobody expects us to be perfect. We all have responsibilities. No need to hide it or to make excuses. A lot of successful folks actually have this imposter syndrome, or call it fraud mindset. What can we do to overcome that?
Well, like, number one, acknowledging it, right? Just owning it, because for a long time I hid from it, and anything you don't want to look at, it's going to fester and cause you more problems, right? So stepping into it, saying, wow, sometimes I really struggle with feeling like a fraud. One of the things I've learned is once you name something, you take power over it. That's just a psychological fact. So you could name it, and I'll make up a name. My son used this for a fear he had, Euler. It's a made up name, but you could call that Euler. And you know what, Euler, I'm taking charge of you. And the more that you own that and claim that and speak to that entity, the imposter syndrome, you're owning it and you're making it go away. You're shrinking it. You're taking the power away from it. So that's like a great way to really take charge of something, any fear that you have in your life. The more that you step into it, acknowledge it, it's going to make it smaller, and then sharing it with someone. Because I remember the first time I shared that feeling with a friend of mine, very successful attorney. She's a partner in a major firm in Miami. And she started laughing. She said, I can't believe you're telling me this. I said, why? She said, I feel the same way, but I never told anyone. And so when we had that conversation, we both made one another feel better, because not only did we understand it and support one another, but we're not alone. And when we had that realization, we realized there's so many women with this problem, and not just women, there are so many people with this problem. So what I've learned time and time again is stepping into that fear, claiming it, sharing it with the world, really allows that shame and fear to subside, and it kind of starts going away. Then moving into new experiences. So I had an NBA player reach out to me and wanted me to coach him. And I felt like a fraud. I was scared, but I showed up. And showing up is everything, because I didn't die, and I did help him out, and I left there not feeling like a fraud. So the more you start moving into these moments where you're scared you could be a fraud and actually showing up. When I became a chief revenue officer, I thought, am I a fraud? Do I really deserve the C-suite title? I showed up for the job. I took the job. I did a great job. So all of these examples are just breadcrumbs along the way, showing you that, yes, you are not a fraud. Yes, you are worth this. And yes, everyone has flaws, and most of us learn on the way or in the job, and that's okay.
Boom. That is just a terrific, terrific comment. You said the magic word, though. You said the word shame, and I want to go to the book again. You have a chapter in here to really illuminate, or just basically shine a light on shame, to own it. And we'll go back to the book here. We all make mistakes, and I'm no exception. Unfortunately, sometimes we get ourselves into trouble and create adversity that makes our lives more difficult. Now, fast forward, things were looking up when I moved from Michigan, thanks, Heather, to Florida to start a new job. About a month into the job, I was focused on forging relationships. So I set up a dinner with our largest advertiser, Ben, who owned a number of car dealerships in the area. At dinner, we shared some wine, conversation, and before going our separate ways at the end of the evening, now this was long before Uber, so you actually got in the car and drove yourself home after dinner, or attempted to, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the book. I was pulled over 2 blocks away from my house. The officer asked me if I had been drinking. I told him that I had. He let me know that I was speeding, and he was taking me to the station. I had never been arrested before, so I was freaking out, had no idea what to expect. Uh-oh. When we arrived, I was brought into a small room with no windows to wait. A few minutes later, 2 male police officers entered this tiny room with you. One made inappropriate comments about how I looked and what acts I could perform in order to be released. Yes, that really happened. In that moment, I felt powerless and realized that I could be assaulted or worse, excuse me. Then I started to scream. The first officer didn't seem fazed, but his partner was clearly not comfortable with what was happening. They argued and then left. A female officer then came into the room, escorted you to another room. You had all your stuff taken. You were stripped down and changed into an orange jumpsuit. Was it at least like bright orange? No, not funny. Orange jumpsuit, and put into an enormous holding cell with one toilet in the middle of the room and women lying on the floor. I was mortified and scared, sat in the corner, literally rocked back and forth for what felt like an eternity. I was finally given a chance to make a phone call. So, of course, you called Ben to come and get you out of jail. But hours went by with nothing happening. Finally, you heard a tap on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. A female officer called you over and said, "Why are you there?" She told me that there was no reason why I should be in jail, and asked why I hadn't left yet. I told her exactly what had happened. It took some time, but she discovered that the officer that harassed you hadn't put you in the system. Ben showed up to bail you out, but he was told you weren't there. Luckily, the female officer fixed the problem. You phoned a bail bondsman and was able to get yourself out of that situation. How awful was that experience?
That was terrible. But, the thing about the shame part is even worse, because for years I didn't tell anyone about, or I tried not to tell people about that story, and it would haunt me. I remember I was flying to DC for a really high level meeting. There was a lot of CEOs, owners of companies going to be there, and all I thought to myself is, everyone's Googling me right now, because when you go to a meeting with a lot of people you don't know, everyone Googles everyone, so you know a bit about, you're prepared to meet people. and I kept searching to see what page is my mugshot on. And so that was a really awful feeling. And, I just decided, rip the Band-Aid off, throw it in the book. And now, it's not something I'm proud of, but I don't feel shame about it anymore. It's out there. And yes, go ahead, Google my mugshot. And, I'm not a bad person. It was a bad decision and a bad situation.
Yeah, I actually, though, if you read further in here, it says after being in jail for a few hours, you got home, took the longest shower of your life, I can imagine. You had no friends in Florida. You had no idea what you were going to tell your boss. You made up your mind you're just going to resign. Up until that point, that's how you had dealt with problems. But when you called your boss, he had a different idea. Knowing people that have been in similar situation, he suggested that you stay. He wanted you to be candid with your employees, tell them what happened and answer their questions, he told me. Yikes. That was almost as bad as quitting. You weren't looking forward to it, embarrassed, ashamed, disappointed. You held the meeting, though. And how'd that go when you finally faced it and shined the light on that shame?
Listen, the challenge is when you come into a situation, I had been there a very short period of time. I am very tough in business, and the company that I was taking over was very lax. So changing culture, you have to be crystal clear. And, I was definitely not, my job wasn't to go in there and take an organization that was winning up another level and it was a celebration every day. I had a losing operation that I needed to flip. In order to do that, I had to be crystal clear, very professional, very direct. And, I had terminated people. So I was not people's favorite person. So then when you show up one morning saying, hey, everyone, come on into the conference room. I was arrested over the weekend. I want you to hear it from me first. If there's any issues or concerns, I'm happy to address them with your clients or whatever. Of course, there are people that are going to bandwagon and say, oh, I have a huge problem working for someone who's been arrested and my clients, you need to come meet with my clients. They're going to, dislike us and I don't want to lose money. So there was a bit of games played around it. And then because I was new and I was making a difference, some of the other competitors in the marketplace picked it up and were, promoting it. It was just, it's an unfortunate situation, but like anything, it was temporary and it passed. So, it was one way to handle it. It was one experience in my life and I chalk it up. It's not the worst thing that ever happened to me. And, you just keep going, you learn from it and you move on.
Yeah, I think that actually your transparency makes you very endearing, and you really find out who are your true friends and fans, and those that are going to hate, they're going to hate anyways. They're going to be looking for something. They're like, oh my gosh, how can she wear her hair that length nowadays, or whatever it might be. So I appreciate you doing that. One of the techniques that you mentioned, though, in the book that can get you through these moments of distress and challenge is to actually, to kind of, I use the word to fake it, or to, phony is not the right word, but basically you say you channel someone else, right? And you mentioned Beyonce, and Beyonce, she channels her alter ego, Sasha Fierce, and it allows her to perform and do things that Beyonce would never do and to hit marks. There's a boxer, Roy Jones Jr., he also a Floridian guy, Pensacola. Roy Jones, the nicest guy in the world. When he gets into the ring, he turns into RJ, which is one of the most fierce boxers that there ever has been. And, there are many folks. Remember the movie Over the Top, the arm wrestling movie, Sly Stallone was Hawk. He'd turn his cap around and flip that switch on. So in the book, you talk about a time where you were channeling, and the chapter is called Channeling Wonder Woman, currently channeling Wonder Woman. But I want to read from the book. So on International Women's Day 2017, I was asked to appear on I-24 News with host Michelle, and is it McCory or McAree? Michelle McCory, I think it is. Yeah.
Probably.
You say potato, I say potato, right? Now, I'll just fast forward to it. It says that the big difference between this and the other times you were on that channel was that this was a live international news show. You were excited about the opportunity and a chance to do something new, but you were definitely out of your comfort zone. Someone kind of tipped you off that she might come after you. And that was a little bit frightening, as you can imagine, but you basically used a technique. And I'll read the book. Back to the book. I arrived at the studio and had a great interaction with the woman who did my hair and makeup. I was then mic'd up, brought out on the set, and seated next to Michelle. I was given an ear microphone, which was a new experience for me at that point. The first thing I noticed was that Michelle was very cold and British. When she asked, I told her I was looking to talk about why women didn't go to work on International Women's Day and about the bronze Fearless statue on Wall Street that had recently been unveiled. The next thing I knew, we were live and she was reading off a teleprompter. There I was, sitting atop Times Square in a studio, appearing on live international news show. This was big. And here's what went crazy though. Michelle came at you aggressively on why you went to work that day. It was easy for me to address, and I set the tone to put me in a comfort zone. But all of a sudden, she starts talking about the gender gap outside of the U.S., which is not in your skill set. You had really no idea how to address that or not. But instead of just throwing up your hands and saying, I don't know, you pulled this trick out of your bag. You actually channeled someone that would handle that. I think it's crazy that you didn't pick Beyonce. You picked the greatest pivoter that we have, which is Donald Trump. You channeled Donald Trump. Talk about a bad mental image, right? Heather turns into Donald Trump, flip the hair over.
Well, it's really smart, right? So one of the things that I do is going into any situation, if I'm up against a massive challenge and I received a phone call, 2 minutes before going on air saying this lady may try to put you in a very bad position. I just wanted to give you the heads up. In my mind, I thought, Heather, who can you channel that can be asked a question they don't know the answer to and get out of the situation flawlessly? And he's the first person that came to mind. He's asked a number of questions on national TV. Apparently he doesn't have the answer or he doesn't want to answer it, and he answers whatever he wants. And so I just thought to myself, if the president can get away with that, why can't I? And so that's exactly what I did. She asked me she said, what's the gender pay gap in the US? I told her, and she said, well, follow-up question, what is it internationally? And I said, that's a great question. However, a better question would be, what are we going to do about the gender pay gap in the US? And I've got that answer. And I just kept moving forward, and she didn't miss a beat. I didn't miss a beat, and I Donald Trumped her, and it worked.
That's an awesome story. When you first read it, you're channeling Donald Trump. It's kind of like, what? But yeah, you're exactly right. And you did it with the Monahan method or Monahan touch on it. By I'm sure. One of the things that you mentioned in your book too is a way that you can build confidence is to command respect. And it's a great chapter in the book. I won't read the whole thing, but just one paragraph here. It says, if someone is disrespecting you or treating you badly, you need to deal with it head on. Like anything else, how you allow others to treat you, well, is how they'll treat you. Others will see that and follow suit. It's critical to nip poor behavior in the bud. The longer it goes on, the more challenging it becomes to change, but it is possible. As with anything, it's a process. What's the first step in actually challenging someone head on and commanding respect, do you think?
Well, it depends on the situation. It can be as simple as someone cuts you in line every day at Starbucks. It's a very easy solution. You tap that person on the shoulder and say, I guess you didn't see me. I'm actually in front of you. Thank you. That's very simplistic. However, you're making it known that you are there and you will be acknowledged and you will be respected. It's no different in business if someone's ignoring you to say, excuse me, hi, you missed me. I'm here. Good to see you. So it doesn't have to be a big argument or fight. It's really just letting people know this doesn't work for me, communicating with them and holding your ground.
Yeah. And do you think, I can see on the surface that it lets everyone else kind of know that you're there and you command their respect. But how much of it is actually you're commanding respect from yourself? Like you're making yourself stand up for yourself, and that actually creates more confidence within
Of course,
yourself.
because people treat you the way you allow them to treat you. So how you're treating yourself is how other people will treat you. So when you begin to see your own value and your own worth, other people will see that. I hear all the time, no one respects me around here. My kids don't listen to me. Well, why do you think that is, right? So number one, you have to be willing to say, I'm worth listening to. I have something of value to add. I deserve to be respected, and I will respect me. I will get up every morning and work out. I will eat healthy. I will take care of myself. I will speak positively to myself. I will do the things that I want to do. I will put myself first, and watch how people start responding to that. They'll treat you differently.
Yeah, right. That is huge right there. Appreciate you sharing that. A couple of last things. By the way, before I miss it, if anyone would like a copy of the book, I've actually purchased 10 books from Heather, and I'll give them away. Just DM me and you'll get it. And it's autographed, by the way, an autographed copy of this new great book, The Confidence Creator by Heather Monahan, as my gift to you. As my gift to you, those of you that are watching or listening. One of the things, and I'll kind of speed it up. We're coming close to our time together, being finished. But you mentioned something over and over and over again in all of your works, and it essentially was this act of journaling. And it seems to me, and maybe you can either validate it and speak to a little bit, but that seems to be like the difference maker in your life. Like, you took the time to do this. Can you tell us about like how you journal? How did you start journaling? And anything else that you can kind of give us about journaling to add confidence to us?
I believe in not overthinking things. And it's funny that you asked me about how to journal. Someone asked me, a younger person asked me that the other day. Do I journal on my phone? Is it okay if I journal on my computer? Do I journal with a pen and paper? Who cares? I'm at a point in my life, it doesn't really matter. It's what works for you. But the whole point in theory for me behind journaling is to get to know myself. So I kept a journal through college. I kept a journal when I got divorced. And you know what? When I hit hard times now, because we're going to hit hard times, people, things don't stay rosy and fantastic every day. I go back and I look at those journals and I look at what I went through and how I felt and how I came out the other side. And it instills confidence in me and courage and inspiration and hope that I know I got through this 10 years ago. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get through this now. So I also learn from the decisions I used to make. When I first got divorced, I wouldn't put myself first and I felt bad all the time and I was low. And, I started making better decisions and then I could see things started working out for me. So you begin to learn from your mistakes, from your good decisions. But it's so easy when we don't journal to look back and go, oh, that wasn't that bad. Oh, yeah, it was. When you start reading how you really felt then, you can start to feel that. And it's really having this insight that you do not have if you don't take those notes, if you don't, make it memorable. We just have this tendency to look back on life and think it was much easier or different than it really was. And the journals for me provide that insight that really empower me to know myself, to learn my inner voice and start listening to it and acting on it and learning the right decisions for me versus the wrong ones and how I can make better decisions moving forward.
Did your sister Stacy teach you that, or did someone else teach you to journal? Was it stepdad maybe?
I believe I learned journaling through my therapist in college. I was seeing a therapist. My mother and I had a big falling out in college, and I went to see a therapist, and I believe it was her that told me that a great way for me to really get my feelings out and start, releasing anger or upset was write it all on a piece of paper, and that's sort of how it started. But what I learned from that is I started learning about me, and that's what I liked. And the funny thing is, journals helped me to write my first book. I looked back on my journals and learned the really key important things across my life that helped me to build confidence. And I put a lot of that stuff into the book.
I love it. You're teeing me up here. One of the last things you talk about is to find someone to hold you accountable to create your confidence. And you mentioned that you sent a data dump to your editor, Ryan. Great job, Ryan. And Ryan got to work on it and use his talents and sent you back a first draft of the manuscript, which would now become, boom, your hit new book. Tell us about that. How did you, how do you find someone to hold you accountable? How do you give someone that kind of permission? I mean, it's very difficult for me to understand how you do that.
Oh my gosh, I hold myself accountable all the time. So when I wanted to launch my online course, but I was struggling with it, I just put it out on social media. I'm launching an online course. And once you do that, the world is holding you accountable because people start DMing you. When is it coming out? I can't wait to see it. So it's like, I call it reverse engineering. When you're stuck in something, having someone else hold you accountable, whether it be on social media or through a good friend or a mentor, it really forces you to accelerate your process and make some major progress because you did put it out there. And I also believe putting things out to the universe will, bring opportunities to you. So letting people know what you're working on. When I finally put it into words, I am writing a book because for a long time I didn't, say that I was, and I was scared. But when you start owning that stuff, claiming it and sharing it with others, it really it accelerates your speed rapidly.
Kind of manifests itself. That's cool. By the way, you really looked afraid you really looked like concerned when you were on James Altucher's
Altucher, yeah,
on
I
his
was.
show. But you were like, yeah, you were like worried about getting sued.
Right.
You were worried, you were worried about the stories in here, and it was genuine. It was so endearing to see you be that
Oh, it was
vulnerable
so
and
awful.
authentic.
I hated feeling like that. I was
Yeah,
so scared.
of course, and then people look at that though, and they see that, and they're like, "Wow, she's a real person. We really could like her." And I think that that's something to be a lesson learned. But I want to ask you, um, how do you feel about it now?
Well, the book came out May 22nd, so it's been out for almost a year and no one sued me. And, all these
You crushed it.
ideas,
Yeah.
these fears I built up in my head weren't real. But this is, my next book is all about going to the next level. And anytime you go to that next level, launching a book is going to a new level. You've never been there before. Anytime you go to the next level, all the fears are going to come back again. Now, for me, writing another book isn't necessarily going to the next level because I've done it. Whatever you do the first time is scary. The second time, it's not as scary, right? So I allowed myself to have all these fears that just weren't real. And instead of, taking a step back and calming myself down, I'm grateful that I shared those fears with James that day. James has written 15 books or whatever. So he had insight for me as someone far ahead of me to say, hey, calm down. No one's going to sue you. That fear isn't real. And he explained to me why. And he felt comfortable saying it because he had done it 15 times. But when you haven't done something, it's really important to have those people who have done it that are ahead of you because they're going to show you that fear is not real and you can move forward. And I did.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the research was watching that show. He's an interesting guy, but you actually were on there, and I don't know if that was the lighting or what it was, but you looked like maybe you had very little makeup on. You had your hair in a ponytail. I don't know if you thought it was just going to be audio or whatever it was,
No,
but
it was because what was so funny? I was going right from there to the airport. It was raining outside. My friend is his producer. My friend is bald and doesn't understand what being a woman's like. So when I got there, James was recording with someone else, some athlete. And my friend Steve said, hey, let's go grab a coffee. I said, oh my gosh, I'm all in. We go outside in the pouring rain and we had to wait in line outside. And so, I mean, what are you going to do at that point? I just got rained on. So I put my hair in a ponytail. I said, forget it. I mean, I'm not going to not go on the show. So we just made the best of it.
yeah, you owned it, and I liked it was a little different, like a different view of you. You're on Elena's show, and you look like you're going on the Oscars to present, and then here you are, with like rained on look. So it was kind of endearing. Hey, let's take a few seconds here, and I want to talk about some more things that you've done, and really I want to know, like, what are you gonna what's coming next? You've been I think it's a guest teacher, a guest professor at some major universities, Harvard and Miami. You actually are, like you mentioned, writing the second book. You have some online courses now. You're traveling around on this circuit, this Keynote motivational speaker circuit. I know that you're still doing some work with Boston Hills, I believe. I found some episodes of that, and then you're doing a conference next month, Level Up Conference. At least that's what it was on my notes.
Yes, yeah, Boston.
Yes.
It's my first live event that I'm putting on. I'm always speaking at other people's events, so this is my first event, so I'm really, really excited for that.
Tell us about that a little bit. Maybe how can some of the maybe it's just for ladies, I believe, but
It's for women only, right? So you can go to my website, heathermonahan.com, and get all the information, or you can go to Eventbrite and type in Heather Monahan in Eventbrite, and it will show up. Level Up Boston. I partner with the Lieutenant Governor, Karen Polito, who's all about empowering women. I've got an amazing lineup of other female entrepreneurs who are extremely successful, and I'm bringing my confidence creation workshop, which I've really perfected over the last year, to the event. It's a one-day event. We're going to break everyone down. We're going to build a plan for how to get to the next level, reach your goals, create your confidence, and obliterate excuses. I'm assigning accountability partners on site, so everybody will leave with someone that's going to hold them accountable to their reaching their goals after the event. Everyone's going to leave with a 30-day plan. I mean, we're really going to set these women up for massive success in 2019, and how to get to that next level, how to move through the fear, and really share the way that I've learned how to do it, and the team that I'm working with has as well.
Super exciting. Now it's in Boston.
It is.
You live in South Florida now. You live on the beach there, South Beach, almost like you're rubbing it in our nose here from Michigan. Are you going to do level ups across the country? Are you going to do just the one in Boston? Are you going to do multiple events? Is this a one-time thing where if they want to see you, they need to go to Boston?
No, so, I was in corporate America for over 20 years, and I've learned a number of things having been there. But one of the things that I've learned is you always want a litmus test of anything, right? So yes, I have a lot of experience speaking at others' events. I need to make sure that this is a profitable endeavor, that it makes sense, that the amount of, time and effort and investment that I have to put into it is worth that return in order for me to start duplicating it. The end result and end goal will be, as long as Boston is a success, which, I have a good feeling it will be, then I will go to LA next. I will go to New York. I will go to Miami. I'll start with the major cities where I've got large groups of people that I know have shown interest, as well as I have other speakers in those locations that I'm connected to that I know would want to join me and partner with me. So it really, it all depends on my litmus test in Boston, but if it goes well, yes, I will be bringing Level Up all around the country.
I love it. I think that it could be awesome. I'm a little, I can't, it's more designed for females, but I believe it could be applicable to everyone.
I know, Mike, that's funny. We've had so many women reach out and say, I want my son to be there. Can you do a men's version? So it definitely will be something that I'm thinking about. The challenge with women, specifically women that want to go to the next level, oftentimes they're not their authentic selves if men are in the room, is what I found.
Oh, yeah.
So they feel afraid of sharing that, I don't feel good about myself, or here's where I'm struggling. And it's important to me that people share those things in these environments, feel that it's safe, and feel they can be themselves. So maybe it will be that we end up doing one just for men. And I would be, listen, my whole entire career, the majority of people I've worked with are men. So I feel very comfortable, leading a team of men. And I would, I'd welcome that opportunity as well.
I would encourage you to also stick to your guns, because I think that there is so much value in the niche play. And I have two daughters, that are one's 12, one's 13, and they would appreciate what you're doing, and you might dilute it by adding, dumb men to the crowd.
I wouldn't mix men. I would do a men only event. Right. Yeah. I wouldn't combine the two.
So I normally have a couple of signature questions here to kind of wrap with, and I'll throw it out here. In fact, sure, we'll do it. Elena asked you the same question, so that wasn't that long ago. I'm wondering if you're going to give me the same answer or a different one. Here's the question. I'll word it differently so that maybe you'll get a different answer from it too. Heather, imagine you pick up the phone, and on the other end of the phone, there is young Miss Heather Monahan, and you have 5 minutes to give her some advice. What advice would you give to yourself right out of college before you became the number one salesperson at the winery?
Yeah, you did word that differently, and it does make me think differently, because knowing myself back then, what my biggest struggle was at that time, I remember, I think I write about this in my first book, I wanted to call Oprah and find out what it is that I should be doing with my life because I felt lost. I didn't know where to go, what I should do. What I didn't know is I held the answer. And I guess knowing what I was thinking back then, if I could be on the phone with me then right now, I would say, you already have the answer. You don't have to find Oprah or anyone else. You have to find that voice within you. Start today by journaling. Start today by surrounding yourself with people that are on that same energy wavelength that you're on. Start standing up for yourself. Don't let people speak down to you because of your outfit or the way that you look. Start stepping into your power. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. Start owning who you are, and all of the answers you're looking for will be held right in front of you.
Wow. Wow. You are convinced. That's awesome. And you're convincing. Follow-up question to that answer, though. Do you think that the 22, 23-year-old Heather could have heard that?
Those are questions we're never going to be able to answer. So one thing I do know is I speak to 22 and 23-year-old girls now, and most of the time they are, listening. They're looking for answers, and they're looking for permission. They want the permission to know, oh, it is okay to ask myself. I didn't know. They legitimately didn't know. No one's telling them that, right? So they're almost asking me. I spoke at a women's conference 2 days ago, and every single woman had the same question, independent of one another, different circumstances, but they would always say, Heather, should I stay in school and get this degree, or should I go pursue my dream of creating a nonprofit? What should I do? And I always say, let me ask you that question. What should you do? And they look at me, you think I know? I do think you know. Actually, do you want to repeat back again what you just said and how you said it? And they start saying, oh, I said pursue my dream, right? I said, right. So what does that mean? Oh, I should pursue my dream. Right. So it's just like they're looking for you to pull it out of them and give them the permission to actually, pursue the life they really want.
I'm so glad I asked you that question and just forgo it. Second question. You mentioned this quite a bit in your book, but I want to ask you, if you could have a legit superpower, which one would you choose? And Heather, what would you do with it?
Oh my gosh, it's just such a crazy question. There's two things that come to mind. One thing I say to everyone all the time is, I'm so good at so many things. I am so bad at singing, and I want to be a singer so bad. It is ridiculous. And I think about it all the time. It is, so I can dance. I have no problem going on stage, but I cannot sing. And so I would just want to sing because I think it's so beautiful. I am personally so moved by music. I have a theme song when I'm going to speak at an event and I'm nervous. I have a playlist I run with. For me, music changes my mindset, and being able to bring that gift to the world, I think, is so beautiful and amazing, and I can't do it. So that would be one. But then the other thing is, lately I have been seeing all these superhero movies, legitimately, Marvel superhero movies, and these people can fly. And every time I'm watching, I'm like, I hate going to the airport. I need to be able to just fly. Can there be a way I can figure that out? So those would be my two answers.
That's awesome. In fact, that's the most common, is that if people could be like teleport themselves. That's the most common answer that I get from guests because of the horror show that is travel getting around nowadays. But hey, you've really impressed me with those, especially the last two questions. You've really opened up yourself and appreciate that. Very, very interesting, very neat. Appreciate you being there. And doing that. I'd also just like to stop and say thanks as well. You're motivating me. I'm sure you're motivating thousands of other people to actually do that, to pursue their dreams and to live the life, to feel, to feel uncomfortable and to stretch and to really have a great life instead of settling for that lane that maybe we find ourselves in for some reason. Appreciate that. Appreciate your many positive and helpful words of advice. And again, we all appreciate you and your work, Heather, and we wish you much fortune and success both now and in the future. As we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, it is about the journey. And Heather, we wish you well on yours. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in today. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and maybe that little bell so that you'll be the first one to get each new episode. And hey, if you'd like to support the show, ratings, reviews, likes, shares, and comments are all welcomed and gratefully appreciated. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show. And of course, thanks for being awesome.